Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Busboys and Poets Books Presents. It's been a while since we've had an online show, and we are so excited to see everyone. I hope everyone is staying safe and well this autumn. And without further ado, we are happy to host Claire Nader. Claire, if you don't know, is a political scientist and author whose work looks at the impact of science on society. With a plethora of recognitions and achievements under her belt, Claire's goal of being a synergistic public citizen is all over her work from start to finish. And with her newest book, she gives you the tools you need to empower your teen at home with their own education, how they learn, how they interact in this world, how they do a lot of things. And in conversation with Claire tonight is Busboys and Poets founder and CEO, Andy Shallal, whose art and social entrepreneurship collides with culture and politics here in the DMV for a socially conscious experience for all. And now, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring them on screen. Hi, Claire. Hi, Andy.
Hello. Thank you so much, Lori.
Of course, I'm going to disappear now.
All right. Thank you and welcome, Claire Nader. It's so wonderful to have you with us, Dr. Nader. I know that, we did a whole bunch of these conversations during COVID. We learned how to use Zoom, rather effectively, frankly, and had some great authors and great speakers, including your brother, Ralph Nader, of course. But we were just talking a minute ago before we came on, and you said you'd never done this. And this is, and you decided to do this as a gift for young people, for society, to create a better world. Can you tell us the motivation behind the writing of this book? And of course, the book is about how to talk to tweens. It is about that.
I spent many years, of course, I shop like everybody else, and I stand in line to pay, and there's always somebody in front of you. And the children, parents were there with their young children. What did they do? They fussed around, they wanted to leave, and I would watch them fuss and pull on their mother's hand, and I would look into I'd catch their eye. And the minute I caught their eye, they never left me. And I never left them. And I started talking to them. The first thing that happened is the parents tried to answer for the children. And I would say, I'm asking your child, what is the name? Well, the name is Mary, let's say. So, Mary. And I'd ask her the question. And they'd answer, surprising the parents even with their observations. And why is it important to come and shop? What is it you're doing? Are you cooking tonight with your mother? And do you talk when you cook with your parent? Because my mother found out what we were thinking by cooking with us. And that's why she wrote her little book, It Happened in the Kitchen. What is the it? She got impatient. She's writing her recipes because we wanted to not to forget them, and she was writing them, and then she got impatient writing the introduction, and she said, "Oof, it happened in the kitchen. It all happened in the kitchen." I said, "There's the title.
There's the book.
There's the book."
And
it was a bestseller. She always used to say to Ralph, "I sold more than Unsafe at Any Speed's first printing."
Good for her. I have a copy of it, and there are some great recipes in there.
Yeah. And then later on, it came out in a publisher wanted to do Ralph Nader family cookbook.
Yes.
And it's really based on mother's cooking, mother's recipes, mother's inventions, I must say. The cookies called 222s are an invention, showing her impatience. I don't want to have to remember and look at the thing, So she said, 2 of everything.
That makes sense.
And the baking powder.
So so somebody had to sit down with her and, of course, do measurements and all of this. That must have been unnerving for her. Someone that's just used to.
Well, I did the first cut with her. It was in 1974, believe it or not. And the minute actually she put her recipes down, she wanted to refer to them.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
That is funny. So the way we made sure it was correct is we went and cooked in one of the best. Uh, my friend Joan Claybrook, our friend Joan Claybrook,
Yes, yeah.
uh, has a wonderful kitchen, loves to cook, loves to measure, and so they would cook every day with my nephew, Tadic, would take mother, they would cook together. He would take off after they did their final recipe for that day, and mother and Joan would sit down and have tea and eat whatever they had done. So that was the
Beautiful.
story that happened in the kitchen. So how did this come about? This came about because mother always talked to us. She always talked to us. And that's when she found out what we were doing in school, what happened, what needs to happen, and the like of it. And you were telling her everything because you were relaxed for one thing. She wasn't quizzing you like a hard taskmaster.
Yeah. And the book we're talking about here is Tweens, a book for you and your family. You are your own best teacher,
Yeah,
sparking the curiosity, imagination, and intellect of
yeah,
tweens.
yeah.
Who are the tweens? I know you define them
The tweens
specifically.
are 9 to 11, the cohort.
Uh,
And that's before they enter their teenage years and the hormones start raging and they put their ideas on some other things and not learning how to teach yourself. And so you want to get them early in order to navigate the increasingly difficult time of iPhones and whatever is happening in their teenage years. It is how shall I put the book is an antidote to what's coming to hit them. And
but go
and
ahead. I'm sorry.
look at screens so many hours a day. If you're looking at screens, you're not talking. And if I had to deal with youngsters today who are having problems, I have the image, Andy, of taking them to the garden where the worms are and the soil is rich and so on, watching the worms work, putting your hands in the soil. The minute you do that, you get to reality
Mm, yeah.
and you
This,
start growing things yourself, and you may not want to go back to your screens for entertainment and whatever else, and for seduction and for what I like to call the electronic child molesters.
mhm.
They're
Well,
molesting kids.
it's interesting they talk about the soil and the importance of touching the soil and how that connects you to reality. There are programs actually in inner cities where they take old abandoned lots and turn them into gardens and get ex gang members to get involved in planting. And once people start planting things in their neighborhood and watching them grow, violence is reduced.
Yes.
People become just better neighbors, know
Mhm.
how to deal with one another better.
Yeah, they do. Surprise, surprise. That's how far away we've gone from reality. And and it's interesting to me and also horrible to know that the Zuckerberg families and the Zuckerberg types who want to take other people's children and put them into the metaverse, as they call, won't let their own children have the screen time.
Mm, interesting. Yeah, they
Interesting.
know. Yeah, they
Yep.
know the impact.
Now, what the difference of this book is that most many things that are written about uh, youngsters and mental health and the phone, the devices they call them, can be cured instantly by this approach. Get them back to reality, to nature. You begin to notice things, and nature is slower, by the way. If you wanted to observe a tree, why do kids like to lie under a big tree? Move their arms. Children have to move their arms, roll in the green grass, and look up. Now you say, well, inner city kids can't do that. There are parks. There are parks, and when It was the children who led the fight in New York City to ban pesticides in city parks. They went, the cutest hearing, one of the council members said he ever had, was when they came into his council chamber and sang, "This land is our land." How can you resist that? So the moral authority, they're like moral beacons. They have nothing to entangle them in special interest, as we call them, and so on. Their interest is their life, and it's very clear what their life is. So
You speak in the book. I'm sorry. You speak in the book about how kids really do not realize their power sometimes, and how I used to work and testify before the school board when we lived in Fairfax County, and every year we'd go and talk about issues, more funding for the schools, more for the arts, more for this and that, and the most impactful testimony always came from children. The minute the children started speaking, the entire council got silent. When an adult was speaking, they'd be whispering to each other, they'd be talking to each other, they'd be, distracted. But when a child spoke, they knew better. They had to pay attention. And kids don't recognize that. They don't realize that they have this power.
That's what makes them powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever they say, they say. For example, in the book, the 11-year-old son of Joe Califano, who was on Lyndon Johnson's cabinet, he was a chain smoker. And he asked his father, "How long do you think you will live if you continue to chain smoke?" It was like a thunderbolt for Califano. And it catapulted him all the way to establishing the Center for Addiction and Abuse. And, like a smoking, like smoking. And it's still going, and he's pushing 90, if he isn't 90 already. I mean, out of the mouth of babes.
Mm-hmm. Now, one could say that social media has also opened up opportunities for children. It gave them more insight to the world, kids that may not have opportunities to engage with people beyond their neighborhood or their city or their town. And that it has a role. I mean, you recognize that social media has some significance, some role. I mean, look at what's happening in Iran today. Look at what's happening all over the world, where social media sparked movements. How do you balance between, the overindulgence and the commercialization that oftentimes I think your book speaks about, versus the positive attributes of social media and having a cell phone at the ready?
Well, you have to be 21, I think, sometimes a couple of years older to get a car license, a driver's license.
True.
And here you have a machine that's driving you crazy. Mm-hmm. You, the child, you, the parent, fighting over screen time.
Well said.
So on. And they don't have to be a certain age. I think they should be a certain age. Now, in Europe, I don't know what they understand that we don't, but the Baroness Kidron went to Silicon Valley and told the heads of the big tech companies, "Stop it. Don't come to Europe. Britain has much safer laws for children." California now has passed the most instructive law for keeping children safe. They call it keeping children safe, just like you do car safety, product liability. That's a different approach, but it's just California. We hope it's a pace setter.
Yeah. I remember years ago. We work really hard as a society to disempower children. The way we teach them, the way we teach even civics, is really disempowering. I remember years ago, Ralph put together a conference where he brought social studies and history teachers, middle school teachers, to Washington, D.C. to show them how to teach civics in a way that empowers people as opposed to the way that it disempowers people. Oftentimes, we teach those types of things from the top down. We have buildings that are big with big doors and big columns and make it very scary for people to get engaged and get involved and question authority. Your book speaks to that. Can you speak more about how society has created a situation where kids and even as they grow up, they feel disengaged from their own the reality that they live in, and they feel disempowered in trying to make a change that is necessary sometimes in their society or in their home or in their neighborhood?
Yeah. I remember the story I want to tell you here. The lady who typed the manuscript for this book, first typed it, said to me, her 10-year-old grandson had a video game he was playing, and she didn't want him to play so much. She thought she was mitigating the consequences a little bit by playing the games with him and hoping they're safe. But when she was typing this manuscript, she said to him, "Joey, who's raising you?" He was playing in this game. And he said, "Mommy." "Who else?" "Grandma," talking to her. Yeah. "Who else?" He looked perplexed. She said, "How about that instrument in your hand?" And bingo, wide open eyes. I want to go back to that and see where he is now.
Interesting.
But she wouldn't have asked him that if she hadn't been typing this manuscript, and we talked a lot about it.
Mm-hmm. Is it possible to undo what the damage that's been done? How do you put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak?
Parents are very important, and teachers are very important. That's why I like this book in the schools.
Mm.
I'd like them to put aside these mandates that the state hands down. Education, the teachers know their students better than these mandate people know. And they should be able to become intelligent, knowledgeable individuals without having these mechanical mandates, like one unit of civics. One unit of civics. People fight that. Boards of education fights that too, in many ways. I haven't gone to. I want to do more with the youngsters themselves. I mean, I want to take this book to our own school system in Connecticut, in Winsted, Connecticut, and see if one of the teachers will do something with it. And there's an academy in South Carolina that is a possibility, independent. I mean, that's not supported by money in the tax base. And I think the libraries are going to be a big asset. I have an anthropology colleague, mine, she's an anthropologist. She read this and she said, I wish I had this when I was their age. My life would have been different. Now I have to get her to spell out how would she think it would be different.
Yeah.
Very quite interesting. So, and the people who commented, gave praise, they call them the blurbers. I don't think I knew more than two of them. They weren't people I knew. They were not friends or colleagues even. But I've learned to know them. I mean, they are really wonderful. If you analyze the comments, 13 of them, one of them is my classmate from Smith. That was interesting because she's a radiologist. She was. And she said to me, I have never read a book like this. And I sent each of the blurbers 2 complimentary copies to give as they wanted. And she said she hadn't answered until she located to whom she gave it to. And she picked two examples from her own family. Very interesting letter. Now she's going to tell me what they think. That's
Very good.
important. Get the feedback.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Have you
And,
go ahead.
and you see, families don't know how to talk to each other anymore. They're all rushing around. Two parents working, if there are two parents, or you have single mothers or single parents, and they don't sit down to dinner anymore. They
Mm,
run. They run on the run. That's why fast food is so you know damaging. Well, first of all, you should sit down at dinner and have conversations with your parents. You discover things about each other. They even discover to know their children better.
mhm.
They send you
I
to school. They
there's
send them.
some there's some beautiful comments from different folks, as you mentioned. The one of the most interesting one was a professor at he is a professor at the University of San Diego Law School, Professor Robert Feldman,
Hellman.
right? He
Yes.
said, all in all, this book is full of wisdom, more than any other I have read in my 76 years on this
Yes.
earth. And it is written with subtle humor and the clever use of examples. I wish I could have read this to my two sons. None of us would have fallen asleep, and all of us would have grown wiser.
Yeah. And he
That's
heads
that's,
the.
that's remarkable.
He's a public interest lawyer professor, and he heads the Children's Advocacy Institute at the University of San Diego. So
Amazing.
he advocates for kids.
Have you had a chance to talk to tweens specifically about the book and some of the things that you write in there?
My grandniece
Uh
called
huh.
me up. She's reading it. She
Uh
called me up, and the one thing she wanted to tell me, because there's a quote from Kids Post. The Post puts up. I mean, the New York Times, and so she wanted to tell me, kids like to be part of the conversation. If you remember that part of the book, kids like this.
yes.
That I quoted it, and
Yes.
she wanted to especially tell me. She said, "Copy Claire," she said to me, "I can handle the truth, even when it's painful."
Oh wow. I love
She,
it.
I love it. Now, I would never have picked that up. She did.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can handle the truth. I'm big enough, old enough, wise enough. That's what she was telling me,
Yeah. Well, I
even
mean,
if it's painful.
too often I think when we see kids, for example, I've noticed it when you see like somebody's children, they walk in. If it's a girl, you automatically say, "Oh, how pretty you look," and if it's a boy, "Oh, how handsome you look," or "What sports are you playing?" We never ask them, "What book are you reading?"
Yeah,
or "What's your favorite subject in school?"
yeah.
or those types of things. I think that seems to be lost
Yeah.
oftentimes.
Well, I'm getting feedback. If there's a family I know, and they have twins who are 10 years old, one boy and one girl. So I said, read the book and tell me what you think. I want feedback. And to the parents, I said this too. The girl is she's halfway through. She hasn't given me feedback yet. And, they said, and then you can talk to the author. But my grandniece, who told me she can handle the truth, I would like her to do a review of the book. And she will ask me, "What's a review?" I said, "Ask your grandmother. She's a professor
Uh,
of anthropology, and she can tell you what a book review is." Wouldn't that be fun?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. To get a review from a tween would be great. I mean,
Published anywhere.
full circle. Actually, and like you said, people will really pay attention to that. You might
Yeah.
have you might have Ralph give a review. People may or may not read it, but if a tween reads it, I mean, writes it, people will pay attention for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the young lady that spoke about the environment. Greta Thunberg. I mean, she was
At
what,
9,
14 at
she woke
9.
up at 9 o'clock, 9 years old. when she
Yep.
started to teach herself.
Which is right. So, and then she spoke before the UN, and people paid attention. I mean,
And yeah,
that's the power I think that kids can see in their own selves.
no, Autumn Peltier, also an example of a water warrior
Mm,
from one of the tribes.
yes.
And the tribes are interesting. The Native Americans, as Winona LaDuke points out, they are intergenerational to begin with. They expect their youngsters to grow into leaders. Isn't that
Mm,
interesting?
mm.
Now,
And
that
Winona wrote
family,
a very nice excerpt for the book as
yeah,
well.
yeah. And she told me that. She said that's in the culture. So
Now,
there's so much. The reason this cohort is very important now, it was pointed out by Nicholas Ashford, MIT, in his comment. They are arguably the most important generation of our time because we're running out of time on the planet. And it's when they become the leaders, they are the leaders that are going to help us in or out of it. That was a very important thing. And he found it exciting and he was going to recommend it to his 10-year-old grandson. But I said, boy, in our family, you wouldn't say I'm going to recommend it. You'd say, read it.
I'm going to band-aid it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you go through a lot of examples in the book, dozens of examples of different things. One of the things that stuck out in my mind in reading the book was about the dictionary and the importance of the dictionary. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah. And I don't mean online either.
Mm.
I mean, you hold it in your hands. We buy dictionaries and give it as gifts. And the nice thing about this particular edition uh, is it's dark print, really dark print. And many of the older dictionaries were pretty light. And I still use my old dictionary, but I like the dark print. And I leave it next to my bedside table. If I wake up at night and I feel that I want to read something, I pick it up and read. It is enchanting. She
And
said,
how do you read a dictionary?
how do I read a dictionary? I, uh, I remember asking my brother that, my brother Shafiq. He said, and by the way, Shafiq means sympathetic. He was a wonderful big brother who put his arm around the young and taught them. Anytime he opened his mouth, he was teaching us. And we used to say he was an old man at 17.
An old
And,
soul.
yeah, wisdom. He had a lot of wisdom. And he was a born teacher. I mean, he wanted to share with anybody, grown up or not, or young,
And
what he knew.
how did he deal with the dictionary?
The skin of a thought, he said.
Uh,
He, he would see what it meant, go to the root of the word and where it came from.
mm,
And so we valued that. And then came the Encyclopedia Britannica, and then came the Encyclopedia of the Social Sciences.
mm.
It was
And now
very,
now it's Google.
now it's Google, yeah. But I like the encyclopedia. I still go to the encyclopedia.
Mm,
And by the way, that's when he taught us um, that not everything you read in the encyclopedia is necessarily accurate.
uh,
And that I gave the example of uh, how they used to say that the Hawaiian Islands and the Queen, we 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 displaced her. They didn't ask us to come in.
mhm. Yeah, and it's interesting because not everything you look up on Google is accurate either. But
That's
yet people, say you can Google it and you can find anything pretty much. You can find anything about anything to confirm your belief on Google.
yeah,
And really, there's no common truth. There's no reality becomes very foggy.
fungible.
Yep, absolutely. And that's why you have people that that speak. They have their own truth that is different than the reality of what ought to be. So I wanted to go a little bit to the idea of self-discipline and some of the uh, need for kids to understand what that means and how to use it. And you bring up the examples of very well-known people like Helen Keller, like Benjamin Franklin, like Frederick Douglass, and people like that. Speak to that a little bit about the idea of self-discipline. What does that mean, and how do you cultivate it?
You cultivate it by using it.
Mm.
If you go deeply into a subject or you stick with something, uh, can't remember the quote exactly, but Alfred North Whitehead, who taught at Harvard, I quote him, and uh, he says that you focus enough on something, you get meaning out of it better than if you lightly go over it. You have to get meaning out of it. I could find the quote if I had to in the book.
Mhm.
Alfred North Whitehead, you go to fortunately, there's an index.
Mhm.
Now, an index respects the reader. The reader might want to go deeper. You make it easy for them to find out. There's a proverb here that you might like a lot,
Mhm.
and let me see if I have it from. Is it 199? Yeah, I like it very much. Now, just think. You don't just read this. You read and think about it. Abu Hamid al-Ghazali. It's well known.
Mhm.
Knowledge without action is a means without an end, while action without knowledge is a crime.
Mm. Oh,
It
that's deep. That is really deep.
Knowledge without action is a means without an end, while action without knowledge is a crime.
Yeah, we've seen that play out. That's for sure.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that. Very timely. Why
Yes.
do we go to Proverbs? Because they've met the test of time.
Yeah. Yeah. So what is special about these folks that you mentioned, the Helen Kellers of the world, the Benjamin Franklins of the world, the Frederick Douglasses of the world? What makes them unique?
The reason I use them is to show,
I'll throw I'll throw your brother in there as well, Ralph Nader.
yeah, well, let's stay with the historic. Well, we're getting to be history, aren't we? We did celebrate the 55th anniversary of Unsafe,
Right, exactly, exactly.
um, uh, which, by the way, they put out a report. Ralph never liked just patting yourself on the back for what you have done. What's still left to do, let's say on auto safety. And they
Mm.
put out a very nice report, not just Ralph, but the group still working on such things. And it's very instructive. There's still a way to go. You celebrate what you've achieved. It's my
Mm.
father um, defined patriotism.
Mm.
They never liked the newcomers. Never liked uh, him to talk about criticize this country. For them, it was an opening, wonderful new life where they're a business, we're making money. And so he said, and so they said, if you don't like it, leave it.
Mm.
Love it or leave it. And the way he answered them right then on the spot, it was at a gathering. He said, look, I like it so much that I have to criticize what I don't like. Celebrate
Absolutely.
what you do like and criticize what you don't like. A way to go. Well, that's the definition of patriotism. It's not just waving the flag.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I always say that immigrants are the insurance policy for this country because we see when things start to go wrong first,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then we raise the alarm bells much earlier than people that have been living here in the stew for all these years.
Yeah. That's very good, Andy. Yeah, that's very
Yeah.
good.
So we have a few questions from our, I'm sorry, go ahead. We have some questions from the
I want
audience.
to just point out, I don't know if I can find it right away, but Frederick Douglass, let's see here. Frederick Douglass knew about slavery in a way. It's like he didn't have to experience it to know how brutal it was. It's said much better in the book by
Yeah, I
him.
mean, but he did experience it, obviously,
He did experience it, but he knew it before he even experienced it.
Yep.
How
Yeah, I see.
brutal it was. The way it's said, it's very deep. So
Well-
you want the reader, and there's where the families come in. 9 to 12, that's pretty young. Right, so I made it for tweens and their families. So it provides them with all kinds of, I mean, if you took the table of contents, well, I call it that, all these 54 items, sections, narratives, we're called, you have a conversation at the dinner table.
Yeah.
Just read it all together and then talk about it. 54 conversations at dinner. You'd want people coming to dinner.
Yeah.
I'm going to try that.
Yeah. So let me ask you some of the questions that the audience have. It says, Claire, any direction in how to speak to children about multiculturalism and give them a more positive outlook on it?
About multiculturalism?
Uh-huh.
Well,
how do you
we call it diversity?
Yes, to accept people that are different than they are, who have different ideas than they are, who come from different cultures and different backgrounds.
Well, I'd like to say how Ralph said it very well. He says, how different are we? We bleed the same. The blood looks the same. The heart looks the same. I mean, we're made the same.
Yeah.
We're just not raised the same. And you can always learn from the different cultures. First, what draws people are the food.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, the Mediterranean diet is coming to be the diet to be on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
people get introduced to food immediately. Yeah.
And if you start with food, for example, which is always good, kids come to each other's houses after school and they eat. And that's why my mother baked with kids, with children. And then after she passed, we had baking classes at the school. And 4 weeks in a row on a Tuesday, let's say, and one of the recipes had to be her bread. And then they made pizza. When they made the pizza for the Italian, they would invite. I had them invite somebody to come and eat it, like for supper, and pick them up and take them home. And they had to learn how to have a guest and introduce them to the children. So whoever the relative was, the father, the mother, the grandmother, or whoever came for that child, then would be introduced by the child. And that was the first experience they had, introducing a parent to their schoolmates.
Interesting.
Yeah. How to be a host.
I have another question. It says, have you ever thought of hosting a podcast with tweens or teens to explore these ideas?
No, I haven't.
It'd be really interesting to do, actually, to be in conversation with young people. This is from Sam Simon. To be in conversation with young people to get their take on some of the ideas that you present in the book.
Who asked that question?
Sam Simon.
Oh, no, I haven't done that. Well, there goes the device again, right? I'd like to try it in our library at home in Winstead, where I'm face to face, and and when we can get face to face again. But I don't
Yeah.
know. But I'd like to get a teacher to try it.
Mm.
I really
I
would
think,
like to get a
yeah.
teacher.
I mean, podcasts are a really great way to open up your imagination as well, because
Yeah,
you're using your auditory senses, and you're able to imagine things that a screen is is not there. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
do.
always love listening to podcasts because it gives me new ways of envisioning things that
Yeah,
otherwise
yeah.
may not be there.
And what are
Um,
you doing? Do you have a podcast yourself?
I don't. I do these conversations sometimes with notable authors such as yourself, and we have them online, so they stay online for a while.
Good.
Yep. Uh, uh, this is a really interesting question somebody asked. It doesn't have a name of who asked it, but it says, "Do you think at all of the younger Claire when writing this book? Did you do any inner child work to write this book to connect with teens and tweens?"
No, I think it's just in the grocery line is where I got the idea, and then
Oh,
I come home and talk about it, and I remember Ralph saying, "Well, why don't you?" He encouraged me.
yeah.
That's why I have. He saw that I had a great penchant for these children, and then the more I knew about the device and the mental health consequences, the best way out of mental health is to use your mind and and your creativity and all the assets they have. And we say the subtitle is sparking the curiosity, imagination, and intellect. I don't want to leave out an essential ingredient, and that is their practicality.
Mm,
That's why if you stop smoking, you stay healthier you live longer. That's practical. Seat belts. Margaret Mead pointed this out. Uh, they were the ones who got over after their parents to put the seatbelt on when they first went in. So how can you tell your kid you're not going to put your seatbelt on?
yeah.
Very
Exactly.
interesting. So the help came from the youngsters
Yeah.
because they're very practical. Saves lives. You put your seatbelt on.
The book we're talking about here with author Claire Nader is Tweens, a book for you and your family. You are your own best teacher, sparking the curiosity, imagination, and intellect of tweens. Somebody asked, how can you get this book into schools' reading lists? I know that you talked a little bit about this, you touched on it, but um, this should be part of a reading list because it is a foundational book, right? It's
Yes.
a how-to book, really,
Yeah.
for young people to be able to understand and believe in themselves and feel empowered. I mean, that's it's the only thing they need, really, and then they can figure out the rest,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's a guide. I like to call it a guide rather
Yeah,
than a how-to. A
yeah,
guide to teaching yourself, to getting out of a funk,
mm, yeah,
to and that's why you want to do it earlier before you go into puberty, because
mm,
you need that oomph to show your teenage self. It doesn't have to be like that.
exactly, exactly. What advice do you give to parents in this book?
Well,
Uh,
my mother used to say, and I think she's correct. Uh, American parents, because my parents came from Lebanon, American parents are afraid of their kids
mm,
because when they ask them do this, they'd say, "Okay." Are you waiting for permission? What if they say no? It's not okay.
mhm.
You don't want to get yourself in that position. She said, "You just say you want for example, eating food. We never fought over that. You ate what they ate. We ate what we ate. My father and mother ate a meal, we ate with them.
You didn't each get to have your own special meal because this one didn't like this and this one didn't like
No,
that
oh
and so
no,
on.
that was not allowed. No, you're nuts.
Yeah.
And nobody, when we were growing up, nobody went out and got fast food.
Yeah.
So you want to know that there were hardships, of course. I mean, we were very conscious of having enough money, and therefore there's where values came in.
Mm.
That you had to save up money to go to get higher education, and we did, and we did. And my father always said, I when I was in graduate school, I said, I can get a scholarship, Dad. But you always said if you can pay for it so somebody who can't pay for it can get a scholarship. So we did that.
Oh, very good. Very good. Great
Yeah.
values, really.
Yeah.
I know that both of you and Ralph have spoken a lot about your father and your mom and the impact they've had on your lives. It's profound, and you see it. Very fortunate.
We are very fortunate. When Ralph, people would ask Ralph, how did you get into this line of work? He said, well, the short answer is I was lucky in my choice of parents. He
I love
stopped
it.
everything. You didn't have to explain anymore.
Yeah. Well,
And
I
then
want
when my mother would say, well, what's your son doing? He's just working on this. Uh, and she said, well, he seems to be focused, and I would say he's married to his country.
to. Hmm.
And you can't do the kind of work he was doing and have a family.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
all
exactly.
absorbing.
That's absolutely true.
So
That's
she
absolutely
said
true.
he's helping other people have safe cars to keep their family safe.
Mm.
She was very focused and very, she'd have, of course, we were different. We were immigrants and in a Yankee town, it was then a Yankee town. Well, there were Italians and Poles, but the power was in the hands of the Yankees.
Hmm.
And uh, she would um, she would say, "Look, we have our rules in the house, and they have theirs." When you say, "Well, her mother lets her do this," you can never get away with that.
Yeah.
You have your mother, and she has hers.
Well, Claire, this has been a delightful conversation. The book again is Tweens, a book for you and your family. You are your own best teacher, sparking the curiosity, imagination, and intellect of tweens. And we have it available at Busboys and Poets Books. If you purchase it through our online, you'll be able to get a signed copy by the author. So we really do appreciate you. Any final words you'd like to say? I'd like to after we're done speaking, we have a special guest that we're going to have on for a few moments. Ralph Nader will come on and say a few words.
Oh, that's nice. Can I hear him?
I think you
He's
can.
he's going to
Absolutely.
sit where I sit. You mean?
I don't know. I think John is organizing that. Can
Does
we
he
get
know?
can we get Ralph on for a moment? There he is. Hello. See,
Hello.
you're
That.
in the same triangle here. How are you? It's so good to see you, Ralph.
Fine. Yeah, well, I'm a little biased, but this book is about elevating conversations in the family. It all starts with conversations with these kids. They have enormous practical idealism, curiosity, and we allow these corporate hucksters, whether it's the junk food companies or the internet companies, to bypass parental guidance, direct market, and exploit their vulnerabilities of these kids. They're spending 5 to 6 hours a day with that iPhone connection, separated from their families and their communities in what's called virtual reality, now the metaverse. So this is a call for action directly to these tweens, because we know their moral authority once they understand what's going on in the world. And they start doing that at age 9, 10, 11, 12. And so the book has 54 different topics, all of which stimulate conversation. Like, you know how when kids talk about they're being smart, who's smart, they usually talk about test scores or grades. And Claire said, well, are you smart about protecting your own body's health? How about being smart about how these companies are exploiting you with bad products and violent programming? How about being smart? What's a smart voter? So she shows that there are a lot of ways of being smart, and she keeps expanding their frame of reference because they're into themselves, and the narcissism is exploited by the Facebooks and Instagrams and all the rest. So it's these are short conversation pieces, and I think that's the secret of the book, is that it starts with ways of showing these children how they can teach themselves, and no one can stop this process inside a family. And so the subjects are so different, and each one provokes, like talk about the peer group pressures, or they talk about learning to unlearn, like American history, a lot of myths you have to unlearn, or learning by doing, work in a garden, or work with people who have skills as a youngster to learn from them. I think Claire found in her inquiries that kids don't even know what their parents really do at work. And that's a nice conversation. But what do you really do at work if you're a plumber or a lawyer or an electrician or a carpenter or a restaurateur? The quality of conversation, we know, can be very short, nasty, sycophanty, empty, and that's really shortchanging these youngsters. There's an old saying Claire has in the book. That is, if you have a low expectation of these children, they'll oblige you. But if you have a high expectation, they'll surprise you. And there's a section in the book about a fifth grade class in a low-income area in Chicago some years ago. And the teacher said to them, well, we're going to have a year's project. What do you want to pick as a project? And they all said in unison, our school, it's crumbling. It's falling apart. The desks are broken. We don't have a cafeteria worth anything. It's freezing in the winter. We want a new school. And so he said, okay. And he had them all develop little videos and of their own making. And they got press in Chicago, and it got to the aldermen, as it's called, the local government. And they didn't get a new school, but they were transferred to a better school. You see, that it was interesting to see the interaction of the moral authority of these children to the adults who felt either ashamed or guilty properly. You have all these skyscrapers and all this wealth in Chicago, and they can't provide decent physical schools and materials for these children. So,
and the author, Ralph, wrote a book. The teacher wrote a book called Spectacular Things Happen Along the Way.
Yeah.
It's teaching in the cracks, he says, between the rigid curriculum. And I'm amazed how these kids, they really understand. Like, she has a section on what we own as a commons. We own the public lands, the public airways. The youngsters never learn that in college. They don't learn that. We didn't much learn it in law school. It's called the commons. The biggest wealth in our country is owned by the people. The huge mutual funds, the pension funds, the public lands, onshore, offshore. She even says, okay, as kids, do you know about wrongful injury? Of course they do. They know about bullying, car crashes. And they says, well, do you know about contracts? Well, what do you mean? Well, don't you click on? When you click on, you're tied up with these terms and conditions on your computer, on your iPhone. So she teaches them the fundamentals of torts and contracts.
Mm.
I mean, we're shortchanging these youngsters terribly because they're just marketing objects for exploitation. Put the junk food in them, put the junk drink in them, obesity, diabetes.
For children.
This country is very cruel to children.
Well, this is I'm thinking of this book and likening it to Unsafe at Any Speed. It's like a sequel to Unsafe at Any Speed. Really, it talks about, you know, just as the safety issues were talked about and uncovered in the car industry, you're talking about uncovering safety issues with social media and the metaverse that you talked about, and the hucksters that you speak about that have abdicated, where parents have abdicated their responsibility as parents to these folks who their only interest is to try to sell stuff to children.
And bad stuff.
Bad stuff, absolutely. I mean, oftentimes it is, and too much stuff. You know, that's the other part, is the over consumerism that plays into the hands, and that's the idea, is that sell, sell, sell.
I don't think a lot of adults, Andy, know how bad it really is. They're selling cosmetics to 6-year-old girls.
Oh
They're
yeah,
selling war toys to 5-year-old boys. They're selling over medications. There's a section in the book on the beauty business, and we quote the
Anita Roddick.
Anita Roddick, who I think you might have met. She started this cosmetic company, but it's just for moisturizer. She was the biggest critic of the cosmetic companies for their manipulation and their exploitation and making people feel bad because they can never reach the 1% of the most beautiful people, and desperate to buy a lot of bad stuff in cosmetics, which are often close to pharmaceuticals. Now they're so strong. So it's like Unsafe at Any Speed you mentioned. The really common thread is you raise the expectation level of these children so that they become more confident, self-resilient, more curious about the world beyond this tiny internet gulag, which all the benefits are touted by the companies. They don't talk about the dark side. And now the Federal Trade Commission, academic studies, the California law, Claire pointed out, it's starting now to say, look, you're really damaging these children. There are higher suicide rates, the narcissism, the nastiness, the anonymous comments that come over, huge pressures, commercially driven profit pressures on these kids. And this book is sort of a liberation manual, you know?
Well, it's interesting because when people, and children in particular, feel a sense of control over their lives, they become happier, they become healthier, emotionally, physically. You know, that's the part I think that oftentimes is missing, is that sense of power and sort of determination for your own life has such a huge impact. People don't get depressed when they're engaged. You know, they're far less likely to have mental health issues. They're far less likely to be isolated and become pariahs in their community. You know.
Yeah. Well, Claire has a great way to talk to them about their own bodies. She animates their heart, liver, brain, kidneys. And they talk to the child like, you know, I'm a kidney, and if you start drinking, you know, it's going to really, it's going to hurt me and my friend the liver, you know?
Exactly.
She turns it upside down so they internalize their concern because it's their body parts, you see?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all very compressed but not rushed. But the one thing I like, she emphasizes, is the need for solitude. There's a section on the need for solitude. You know, our parents gave us solitude. You know, lie down, look at the stars on the lawn, or walk through the woods, listen to the whistling of the wind.
Yeah.
All this
you don't see kids outside anymore. They're not playing on the sidewalks anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to say a very special thank you, Ralph, for joining us these few moments at the end. Ralph Nader, of course, consumer advocate, and what Unsafe at Any Speed is now 57 years old,
Yeah,
right?
57 cars are safer,
57.
but there's more to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm going
Every
to
time you get in your car.
put a plug in for you, Andy. I've called Andy Democracy's restaurateur.
Thank you so much. I know.
He set up a restaurant and a bookstore, and a meeting place for civic activity.
Because
And
I believe
how many do you have now?
I believe an informed citizenry is an effective one. Is much more patriotic, is much more able to withstand the ups and downs that sometimes we have to face in this country. So I always believe in America, and I'm very critical, like you mentioned earlier, Claire. I'm very critical of this country because I think it could do better. There's reason why immigrants come to this country is because they believe in it. And when it doesn't live up to that expectations, they're the first to speak out because they've left so much behind to come here. And they're not going to let this slide by. So thank you, Ralph. Thank you for all that you do. And thank you so much, Claire. The book, of course, I want to repeat it one more time, and you can purchase it at Busboys and Poets. And remember, independent bookstores is really the key here. We want to keep independent bookstores independent and keep them going. This is Tweens, a book for you and your family. You are your own best teacher, sparking the curiosity, imagination, and intellect of tweens. Thank you so much, Claire. Thank you so much, Ralph. And thank you, our audience. Any last words you want to say, Claire, before we sign off?
I'm glad you exist with your bookstore, Busboys and Poets.
I love you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Remember, it's inspiringtweens.com, where they learn to teach themselves, which is the best education. Teachers know that, parents know that.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you, Lori, our bookstore.
Thank you all so much. We really appreciate Ralph and Claire making time for us tonight. And of course, a special shout out to Andy. I'm like trying to point at you and I don't know if people will but I'm not gonna lie, I'm glad that you have a bookstore that I get to do really incredible work for. So thank you.
Thank you.
With that, everyone, we're gonna say goodbye to our wonderful guests and goodbye to all of you. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Busboys and Poets Books Presents. You can always check us out on busboysandpoets.com, and you can honestly go through the whole website and find something for anyone. If you want to look at events, if you want to look at some of our delicious sustainable food, or look at some of the really great books we have that feed not only your body, your mind, but also your soul with food to boot for your tummy. So without further ado, thank you all so much. Have a good rest of your evening. Stay safe and well, and most importantly, peace and love.